In this video, I'm going to show you guys how I created my architecture manifesto. This manifesto drawing got me a first at uni and also landed me multiple interviews just because people saw this image online. I'm Sadiyah, a Part 2 architectural assistant in the UK. I love all things architecture, interiors, design, and of course all the girly things as well. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Manifesto in architecture isn't really about style, it's all about taking a stance against a particular subject. A quick Google search tells me a manifesto is a written declaration of the intentions, motives, or views of the issue. Step 1 is to analyze the key themes in your existing architecture project. What are the things that you really want to get across in all the drawings that you produce? 1 is to recognize your themes that you want to make sure you highlight in your manifesto drawing. For me, I had 4 main themes, which was overfishing, globalization, women, and architecture being a resistance. These weren't aesthetic choices about my project or about the finishes or about the final floor plans. The actual building that would be produced was kind of the last thought in my mind when I started my thesis project, but rather highlighting the political issues that were going on around my site location was way more important, and I think created a much more richer and valuable story. In terms of a manifesto, those 4 key things were my political commitments. And you need to get really clear on what you're committed to highlighting, exploring, and demonstrating in your project. Those are your key themes. Step number 2 is to identify the architectural elements of your project that carry those themes through. So you need to identify the architectural elements that carry the narrative and the themes that you just decided on. So what parts of your building encourage the users to pull on the themes that you integrated in your building? For me, based on my 4 key themes, I knew that there were 4 parts of my proposal that really highlighted and pushed that. It was the fish processing areas, which highlighted how gender specific certain job roles were in that Ghanaian community. Number 3 was the place of peace, which in my architecture proposal is this sort of on water floating plantoon. Is that even a word? Plantoon. Floating something. And in my manifesto, I kind of showed it as this spiritual, slowed down, almost heaven-like area for men and women to fish in peace. And number 4 is the trawler removers. Trawlers are these huge boats that can pass through oceans collecting fish. Having trawler removers acted as me showing that there was this radical tool of resistance. And after I'd done that, I thought about how I turned this complicated building, this complicated story into a manifesto that at the grad show people could just look at and begin to understand my thought process behind the project. So in order to understand how the manifesto would look, I began drawing these key components by hand and then translating that into Rhino. Rhino is a 3D modeling software, but I really didn't want clean perspectives. I wanted layered objects, mixed lines, exploded forms, the proportions and the scale to be kind of crazy. I wanted it to feel like a conspiracy. My manifesto image wasn't there to be super accurate. It was to show a really extreme version of what could happen in the future. Step number 3 is where the creative, free-minded process combines with architectural software. And that's why I would really recommend you guys learning how to use Rhino, Revit, Photoshop, the Adobe suite, so that you can really translate the sketches and the amazing hand drawings that a lot of you can produce into stuff that can go on the computer. For me, I watched a lot of Rhino tutorials, a lot of Revit tutorials, did a lot of Revit courses, and that really helped me when I was studying architecture, just to translate everything that I had in my mind onto the computer. The software should be a tool to help you, not to hinder you. So in Rhino, I created a loose base model, the towers, the boat vessels, and the infrastructure. For the focal point, I created this rooftop castle using a bit of a grid system. For the background, I just created a circle, extruded it, and that created my towers. Once I made the towers, I duplicated them around 50 times just to really push this extreme effect of women sweating in the kitchens in these towers high up in the air. I moved between Rhino and SketchUp because I didn't want to model everything myself. That would have taken way too long. So on SketchUp Objects, I downloaded a range of different shapes and items, which I was then able to put into my Rhino model and further edit to match what my goal was for the image. I was constantly importing and exporting different shapes and imagery just to make sure that it all lined up with what I was trying to create. There is a bit of experimentation here, but just give yourself maybe 3 hours to import loads of objects and make certain objects and see what you come up with. I think you should aim to build the base of the model to highlight the key themes that you want to portray in the image, and use SketchUp objects just as accessories to help enhance the image. Once I had created this base drawing, it looked pretty cool, but it was just a black and white 3D image, and it could be anywhere of anything. I went into Photoshop and tried just dumping color on with the paint tool, but I realized it just looked a bit shabby, quite unfinished, and it didn't have much care to it. So after studying some precedents, such as the Bartlett's style of drawings, I realized that I needed to actually go in and hand paint every single element of the drawing. And I was so annoyed at this because I didn't want to spend too long on it as I had deadlines. But I thought, if I really want this image to portray the story and the narrative of Ghana and what's going on, I need to get in there with the line tool, trace over every single element that I'd created in Rhino and paint it to the exact color that I wanted. So I created my own line work. I found different textures on Google Images, put in speculative annotations of the things that I wanted to highlight, what colors they should be, just so I knew where I was going with it. I looked into Ghanaian artists that really knew their way around colors, just so that everything that I was putting into the image reflected the true heritage of the story that I was portraying. I also referenced the colors that I'd already come up with in my portfolio, and the inspiration for the colors in my portfolio came from Ghanaian prints, dusty red sandy hues of Ghana's soils. It was a mix of warm ochre, deep reds, and dusty blue colors. In the manifesto drawing, each color had a really clear meaning. The red was all about danger and extraction. The blue was about surveillance and colonial memory. And the yellow was about hope, trade, and resistance. Once I'd begun going over every single object, from the charcoal ovens that were at the very front to painting the green tiles on the columns, it really helped you identify what the image was trying to say and what it represented for my project. The drawing didn't need to be believable, but it did need to be undeniable in grabbing your attention and making you think twice as you were walking up and down the grad show. I went through multiple iterations of testing different colors, different textures, and seeing how they sat in the Photoshop. My advice would be to definitely organize your Photoshop layers to a save as for each iteration and style of drawing you create. You can see here the process of when I was starting to create the drawing. I hadn't painted everything yet, but I had put the gradient in. I'd put the gradient in the sky. I hadn't brought in some of the browns and the reds yet. Compared to when you look at the back image, you see that I've really taken time to paint everything, and those sort of chocolate browns and the red bullets really come through. This image ended up being printed on 2 A1s. People stopped, they leaned in, they wanted to know more, they were asking questions about it. In the drawing, there was no single focal point. It invited wondering, discovery, and reflection as to where the hell was this project? Is it fictional? What are some of the issues that are going on? It wasn't just a drawing to me, it was a frame for protest and a document for refusal. If you wanted to see the proposal, you could skip through my portfolio that was literally just below the drawing to see the actual floor plans and the typologies and the people that were in the buildings. Manifesto was to draw your eye inwards. I think that's part of being able to sell and communicate your design idea. You need to get someone hooked on what your project is about very quickly. Drawing sparks conversation around what systems are you a part of, what kind of architecture do you want to draw into existence. It took me about 4 days to do the whole drawing, from the moment that I had the idea that I needed a manifesto to really demonstrate what this complicated project was all about, to then having tutorials with my tutors, talking with friends about the colouring and the themes that I wanted to push, to then printing out and pasting up the final image, which I think is actually quicker than you may think. I would recommend, if you have your graduate show coming up and you want to create a really strong, empathetic drawing that highlights all the key points of your project in one quick glance, you make a manifesto drawing. I promise you, it will get much more eyes on your project when it comes to looking for jobs and even securing interviews. Sadiyah from the future here. If you guys want the PDF, which sets out the step-by-step process in order to make this manifesto drawing, what I talked about through this whole video, then comment manifesto and I will send you the PDF that breaks it all down so you can go back and refer to it super quickly. If you found this video useful, make sure you subscribe subscribe to my channel. Let me know the key themes of your projects and how you would resolve them through a manifesto. Thank you for watching.